Melanie with the Ranchers Homestead. Welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to do a different kind of video than I normally do, and we're going to talk all things pressure canner. So basically like basic tips for beginners to pressure canning, because in the winter months is when I mostly pressure can. There's nothing coming in from the garden or really any produce that I can buy even from stands or anything like that. And so all of those things, fruits and high acidic foods, all are going to be water bath cans. So that typically happens mostly in the summertime, but in the winter time, I use my pressure canner a lot. And the things that I pressure can in this is low acidic foods, which would be your vegetables and meats. So anything that has to do with meats, also legumes and beans. So I try and get all of my jars of beans on the shelf. I've shared this before. I have plenty of videos out there on how-tos, and I'll link some for black beans and pinto beans, but I buy my beans in bulk, dry beans, and then, because you can get them super cheap, and then I pressure can them into jars so that they are cooked and ready to use in any recipe, chilies, beans, whatever you need. So I do that every winter. I try and restock my shelves with more beans so that I'm ready to go. Other things like broth, I make all my own broth and bone broth out of chicken or beef bones, and I can them, but they have to be pressure canned because that is a form of meat. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the two different kinds of pressure canners that I would recommend. Now, there's a couple different brands out on the market. I've only used two, and this one here is my Denali canning pressure canner. It's called the Tanker, and you can get it on their website, which I can link in the description. But I really like the Tanker. It is suitable for all stovetops. So if you are someone who has a glass top stove or an electric stove, this is the one you're gonna wanna get. So other pressure canners are not suitable for those types of stovetops, and this one is. It's actually made for it. So that's the only one I know of that's made for a glass top stove. So that's the one that you are gonna want to get if that's the type of stove that you have. Price point wise, of the two that I'm going to recommend, it's cheaper. I think it's just under $200, $175 maybe even cheaper than that. And so if you're new to this, not really sure if you're going to like pressure canning, then definitely this is something that you would want to get the cheaper of the two. The other reason that I like this canner is because it's very simple to use. So if you are a beginner, there is not a lot that you need to know how to do in order to use it, which pressure canning is simple once you get started, but it's very simple with this one. Literally all you're going to do is snap your lid into place once you have your food in jars inside your canner with the water in there. You're going to snap your lid into place, and then that's it. It has an automatic vent system, and so your jiggler stays on at all times, or your weight stays on, and it will do everything. It never comes off. I even store it with it on. So that's a little bit different than, say, the All-American. Now, the All-American is one of the only canners that I know of that is made here in the US. So if that is something that's super important to you, then that would be the route you want to go. But that one needs to be used on a propane stove. So that's what I have here. Like I said, the Denali canner you can use on any stovetop, not the All-American. It actually says in big, huge letters, do not use on a glass top stove. I did for a lot of years, because I only ever had a glass top stove and I had an All-American until I got the Tanker. But they don't recommend it. And the reason is it's very heavy duty. It's very heavy. And so on a glass top stove, it could bust it. This one is super light, so it is a little bit different in that. So those are the two that I would recommend if you're just getting started. I think the All-American is over $250, so if you're just getting started, it could even be more than that, I don't know. But if you're just getting started, you might want to go with the cheaper one that's simple to use, that you can use on any stovetop. I use my Denali here on my propane stove, and you can also use it on any stovetop. So it may be the route to go as you get started, but if you're looking for something that will last forever and is made here in the US and is very heavy duty, and you have a propane stove or you have a gas stove, then you're going to want the All-American, because that one is really great as well. So the next thing I want to do is I want to just go through the different parts of the canner. So no matter what canner you are using, it should come with a rack at the bottom. So your jars will not sit at the very bottom. And actually my tanker here, actually I bought extra racks that can help me to stack my jars if I'm using pint-sized jars. So you are going to want to make sure that there is a rack at the bottom. You do not want your jars sitting at the bottom because that is going to make your jars crack or bust. For the tanker, there is a rubber ring here. You want to make sure that is in place. It also comes with it. Everything here comes with what you need. I don't believe there's a rubber ring on the All-American because their seal is a little bit different. And then the Denali here will come with 2 different weights. One is a 10-pound, one is a 15. And the valve stem here is what is going to be different depending on which weight you use. The automatic vent system is here in the handle, and then it comes with a dial gauge. Now, I listen for my weight. That is actually how I determine I'm at the right pressure, no matter which canner I'm using. The All-American canner has a weight as well. The difference is that you'll keep that weight off. There's only one weight, and there's 3 different holes around the sides of it, and you just put it on the right one depending on your elevation and what you need. This one's an automatic vent, so you leave this on all the time, whereas the All-American, you leave it off, vent it for 10 minutes, and stick it on when you're ready. Both come with a dial gauge. You really want to, I do look at my dial gauge, but you want to use one or the other. You don't want to use them together because they may be slightly different. So I do watch my dial gauge, but I weight never changes. So I always use the weight. If you are using the All-American or any of them, and you just, or any canner that just has a dial gauge without the weight, you're gonna wanna get that gauge tested at your local extension office every single year, because that could change and that's going to affect how your food is shelf stable and safe or not. The weight doesn't ever change. So I always go off of the weight. And I do look at my gauge, but it's not necessary if it doesn't say exactly 15 pounds or wherever I'm supposed to be at, but my weight is jiggling, I always go off of the jiggle. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of go through a list of questions and try and answer them as we go, just some commonly asked questions. And that way, if you're a beginner, hopefully I can hit some of them that you've been wondering or thinking about. The first one is how much water do you put in your canner? Now, when you are water bath canning, you completely submerge jars. When you are pressure canning, you do not. So I always do about 1/4 to 1/2 up the jar. So it depends on the food that you are canning. So if you're doing something like a ready-made meal or even beans, they're gonna be in the canner for over an hour. And so you wanna make sure that you do not run out of water, but they do not need to be submerged and you don't want it too high up. So I always do, like if they're gonna be in there over an hour, I always do about half the jar. If they're going to be in there, so broths only take 20 or 25 minutes, then I don't do halfway up. I usually do about 1/4 of the way up. So just several inches. So it just depends on the food, but you do not need to submerge them. In fact, please do not submerge them. And that's just for water bath canning, because the pressure is what's gonna get you your seal, not the water being over it. Okay, number 2, does your food need to be warm in order to can it? And the answer is, it doesn't necessarily need to be warm unless you're starting with a warm canner. Here with the Denali, you put your jars in and then I fill it with water, and I don't even start my stove until I have my lid in place. So I don't worry necessarily if my jars have super hot food in them, because I'm not putting them into a hot canner. If you are putting it into a hot canner that you have warming up, then you're gonna want your food to be warm, because the problem is if you don't have warm food in a jar and then you put it in, or if you have cold food in a jar and then you put it in a hot or warm canner, your jars may bust. So you wanna make sure that you do that. I definitely do raw pack methods all the time where my food is not hot. Raw pack green beans, raw pack corn, and I just fill my jar, put some water over it, and off they go into the canner. So that is definitely an option. I don't know if I'm on 3 or 4, but next question is, what pressure or what weight do you pressure can at? And for me here in Missouri, I do 15 pounds. It's going to depend on your elevation. So you're gonna wanna look up online an elevation chart for pressure canning, and they should have your state and what yours should be. When I was in California, I did it at 10 pounds, but here in Missouri, I go ahead and do it at 15 pounds. So you're gonna wanna double check that because that's highly important to the safety of your food. So you wanna make sure for your elevation, you are pressure canning it for the amount of time with the right pressure to make your food safe and shelf stable. I answered this at the beginning, but here's another question that people ask often is, what foods do I water bath can and what foods do I pressure can? Just a rule of thumb is low acidic foods need to be pressure canned, high acidic foods need to be water bath canned. And so low acidic foods are vegetables and meat and legumes. And so those are the things that you're going to want to pressure can only. Now, there are people that say, well, my great grandmother, she water bath canned everything. And that is true, they did, that's what they did. And here on my page, I don't do any Rebel canning only because I just don't want to share that information. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I do some Rebel canning. I just don't share those. I don't make them into videos because that is everyone's own discretion. Obviously, botulism is something that you don't want to mess around with. And so even if I am Rebel canning, I am using safe practices. And so that's just something you want to be mindful of, but I do definitely do. Low acidic foods always get pressure canned and high acidic foods always get water bath canned. And that's a rule of thumb here. I have both canners and that's what I do. So that's up to your discretion on if you want to be a Rebel canner or not. Okay, here is a big one, and I get this one actually a lot, and I think it confuses a lot of people. Are pressure canners and pressure cookers the same thing? They are not. So if you have a pressure cooker, an Instapot, or something that cooks food using pressure really, really quickly, that is not the same thing as a pressure canner, and it is not safe to use it as that. So it should say it in your manual on that one, but just to make it very clear, it is not safe. One of the main reasons is the size. They're a lot smaller, so they cool down and heat up very, very quickly, and that does not give adequate time for your food in the jars in the canner. The second thing is that they don't regulate their pressure as accurate as a pressure canner. We have a dial gauge here, we have a weight, we have all the things, and it tells us exactly what pressure we are canning that food, and it has to be at that pressure for the amount of time in order for it to be safe and to kill any spores of botulism in it. And a pressure cooker usually has a high, medium, low, or just doesn't have that same accuracy. And so you want to make sure that you are not using a pressure cooker. They are not the same thing as a pressure canner. You do want to have an actual canner to be able to can your foods for your shelf. All right, that is everything I have on the pressure canner. I hope that it gave you some confidence to jump into this whole pressure canning gig. I know that there are so many people that are scared to death. I used to be that person, that this little gadget here just scares them and they think I cannot have that on my stove and be pressure canning. But I am here to say you can overcome your fears, and I hope that this video helped with that, answered some questions you had lingering in the back of your mind. I have a ton of videos out. I'll link a couple in the description of different things that I have pressure canned, just so you can see it in action while it's getting used. It's very simple to use. It's not a hard thing. I'll try and dig back to an All-American one and the tanker here, a video. I'll link a video to both so that you can see both of them in action, but it is not difficult. And once you get started, you will be so thankful that you learned how to pressure can, because if you are like me and trying to put up food, this opens up a whole nother world of food preservation when you can start doing meats, and you can start doing legumes, and you can start doing broths and all the things that you can't water bath can. So make sure to like and subscribe to the video. I send out one new video every single week. Jump on over to the blog and put in your email address over there. I send out an email a week over there, and that usually has any recipes that are new or anything that I've been working on. That gives you the printable one, along with here on YouTube. I always do a video with any kind of recipes that I'm doing, and it gives you, coming up I know we're only in January, but gardening season is not far away, and so I will start sharing a lot of my gardening tips and the way I get started. I am not a master gardener, but I share what I have learned and what I do know, and just make sure you're following along over there on the blog and get your pressure canner out and get the first project going, because you won't be sorry that you did. We'll see you next time. Take care.